a non-profit organization registered under the Corporate Affairs Commission, this to address issues affecting African women and the look into women's suppression in some cases by religion, culture, and tradition, and as such are viewed as inferior to their male counterparts. To further build capacity of women, the organization, that's VOW, has put together a conference and award event bringing leaders across Africa to address gender-based issues and develop strategic solutions to women's inclusion, empowerment, and leadership. Joining us now to discuss more about this initiative is the Chair, Planning Committee, VOW Conference, Fabia Ogumekon. It's good to have you join us. Thank you very much and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us.
The theme for this event is tagged Repositioning Women. And, you know, let's hear first off the rationale for the theme and what you hope to achieve.
Thank you so much. So as you know, the theme of the conference is Repositioning Women for Greater Impact, a Path for a Progressive Nigeria. Obviously, at the last elections, women really did not fare well. We had over 10% of the entire candidature pool for the last 2023 elections across board running as women. And in that instance itself, our chances were very slim. And we did come out of the elections really not faring well. At Women Radio, through the Voice of Women Conference, which is our 7th edition, we are determined to change that narrative. And the rationale behind this conference really is to galvanize conversations, discussions with policymakers, with those who are at the helm, sitting at the helms, of affairs, those who control certain strategic decisions in terms of understanding the conversations of why we really need to move the women agenda forward, why it's important to have women as part of the political and democratic process, participating fully as 50% of the population. So we're going to have amazing speakers also from across the world, from other countries in Africa to be particular.
Hello, Fabia. All right, we seem to be having a form of network glitch, Ibrahim, but well,
with our own
all right,
people in governance.
So sorry,
as well.
We lost your audio at a point. Do you want to backtrack a bit?
Okay, right. Where did you hear me say, or what did you hear me say last?
Just go back maybe the last 20 seconds or thereabout.
Right. So part of the conference is really about learning about best practices. That's one of the things and one of our key actions. We're going to have, can you hear me?
Sure, we can. Carry on, please.
Okay. We're going to have speakers from across the continent, from countries such as Namibia, from countries such as Liberia, from countries such as Rwanda and Kenya, countries where, the government and the policymakers, they are really moving the needle in terms of gender parity, where women are adequately represented, or at least doing much better than we are in Nigeria. Rwanda, for example, has 60% plus of its women participating in parliament and in the governance processes. We want to have a conversation because it is possible in Africa to have women, fully included in not just economic life, but also in our political life, which really impacts, nation building across board. So part of the initiative of this conference and our theme, Repositioning Women, is really about learning, having conversations with key stakeholders, reiterating why it is important in the growth and livelihood of this nation to have women really participate at the fullest level and the highest levels of governance to really move our agenda forward.
Well, it's quite, I've always said that this is usually a bold step for the fact that, asking, requiring that women, take leading positions, because it's a sort of patriarchal system that we run not only in Africa, but even in the developed world, where they talk more about having, gender parity, gender equality, etc. But does it really, how difficult do you think this task would be to having women taking up, political leadership? Is it really affected by gender?
So that's exactly the conversation that we will be having at this year's VOW conference, which is our 7th edition. It is possible, and we have seen other countries who have, taken that bold step to make it possible, right? It's about goodwill. It's about understanding that this is not a token and this is not a nice to have, but this is really about, not leaving and not excluding 50% of the population. As a country, we can really only move forward when all voices are included, right? So the way, under a patriarchal system, or the way the majority of men in parliament, for example, the issues that they would think about in terms of progressing rights and issues and, matters of nation building, women bring a different perspective to the table. And so the only way we can really move forward as a country is having, is where we have both voices on the table at all levels of governance. It has been done, like I said, in countries like, in other countries across the continent. And in Nigeria, we still say we are the giants of Africa. So we must lead. And, I believe that at this conference, we will reiterate the business case, the political case, and why, this needs to be. And hopefully we'll have, not hopefully, we know that we will have the right people in the room, because we have convened an extraordinary list, a lineup of speakers, including the vice president of the country, including, representatives from countries, like I said, like Namibia, Kenya, Rwanda. Our Vice President, Honorable Kashim Shettima, will be there. The Honorable Governor of Kwara State, Governor Abdulrazak Abdulrahman, will be there, who is a he for she, and who's doing really great stuff in Kwara State with his inclusive cabinet, and we're seeing the results for it. So we have a whole lineup of great speakers at this conference, which will be on the 25th of October, Wednesday, the 25th of October, kicking off at 8 a.m. at the NAF Conference Center in Abuja.
Right. And in terms of women giving, their ilk the needed push, and women, pushing themselves, daring for what people would call the impossible, how does this conference, hope to address that problem? Because when you look at the just concluded general election, there was so much disappointment that despite the advocacy and all the work, the build up to the election, women still recorded a very low percentage of political office holders or elected officers, really. So what do you think is holding women back beyond the patriarchal angle?
Look, you see, the systems are not set up for women to, feel confident enough to enter. And there's so many barriers, as you know, in terms of women's political participation. There's the issue of financing. There's the issue of, getting the requisites and galvanizing the requisite visibility and support. There are the issues which women generally face in the workplace around work-life balance that really enables them to throw their hat in the ring. And there's obviously all the other challenges, with gender-based violence, with political godfatherism. So we have to keep making the case, right? The standard case is this: a nation cannot move forward if half of its population is left behind, if the voices of half of its population are not on the table when it comes to making policy and when it comes to nation building. And so what this conference seeks to do is to continue to make that advocacy and to make that case. And we're going beyond just making the case, but now actually bringing, having conversations with those who are with representatives from other countries who have actually made this happen, to learn from them, what helped in shifting the needle. We have policies in Nigeria. We have the National Gender Policy, which stipulates that 35% of political appointed positions should be reserved for women. We have policies or potential bills, in front of the House of Assembly and the National Assembly, waiting to be passed, that would help in addressing the issue of entry and reducing some of those barriers by advocating for, reserve seats and for special, policy status with regards to women, even in the electoral parties, in the various political parties, and even in the Electoral Commission. Yeah. So if it comes to policy and law, we are advocating and we're making that case and we're doing the work. What we need to do is to continue that advocacy, continue those conversations, have the right people in the room who we can engage with and who can make commitments as we look forward to 2027. And really that's the thrust of this conference, and that is what we are hoping to achieve, to
Now, very
continue
quickly,
that advocacy to... Yes, please.
Sorry to button because of our time. Very quickly and very short, 2 questions in one. I want to know whether this conference is only exclusive for the women, because it's basically, trying to sensitize women, and are men allowed? And another point to note is people will say men are corrupt, women are corrupt, even in holding political offices. So what are the thoughts about women, leading? Are there differences between women taking the leading position as against that of men?
Okay, thank you so much. So to your first question, no, this conference is inclusive. It is being promoted by Women Radio, which is a premier radio station for women in Nigeria. And but it's obviously inclusive. We understand that we cannot do this alone. And like I mentioned, we do have the vice president of Nigeria, of the country, who will be at the conference. And we have, also a state governor, the governor of Kwara State, who will be at the conference. So this is certainly not exclusive to women attendees. We have a host of delegates and participants who've already indicated interest across both gender lines who will be at the conference, because we do realize, of course, that we need both genders to come together to really move this agenda forward. And to the issue of corruption, I don't think that this conversation is really about corruption. It's not about, values in leadership is something that is cross-cutting. We have great and fantastic male leaders, just as we do female leaders, and we have those who fall below par, both men and women. This conversation is about having, women's voices and women's representation on the table. Right, this conference and this conversation is really about fulfilling the policies which we already have in place, such as the 35% policy which we have in terms of women's political appointments, and all the other conversations and sort of bills, legislative bills, and all that we have before our National Assembly, which will really move women's political participation forward and our rights even as citizens in this country. So that's what this conversation is about. There is something different about women's leadership. Women's leadership is certainly more collaborative, more consensus building, and we need more of that in our country. We need more of that today, really, in moving this nation forward. And that's what this conference is about, emphasizing the need for equal representation or more representation of women in the political and democratic spaces. Thank you.
Right, but briefly, what are your thoughts generally on how the issue of financing, especially for female political hopefuls, how do you think women can break this barrier of funding in their political ambitions?
Right. Well, so I think the answer to that question is multi-dimensional. So I'll probably just touch on one or two. The first one is, even within the political party system itself, we need to have conversations and, do a level of advocacy in the next 4 years over some level of reforms, because like like I mentioned, and like you've alluded to, the entry barriers when it comes to finance, even in picking up forms to indicate your interest in running for a position, is so high that itself serves as a barrier, right? So that's one. On one hand, is really making that advocacy to see if there can be special, concessions and incentives and things like that within the political party system to enable, the cost of even indication of interest and entry and participation to come down. The other side is really to galvanize funding for women's, galvanize funding really for women when it comes to running for elections. And that can be done, from a grassroots level, mobilizing women, setting up, there is an organization called the Nigerian Women's Trust Fund, who is a partner at this conference as well, who also already mobilized resources for women who indicate interest in running for elections. So there's a whole gamut of what can be done, probably beyond our conversation today.
All right. We thank you very much for speaking with us on TVC News. We hope you have fruitful deliberations at the VOW conference there. Fabia Ogumeko, Chair, Planning Committee, VOW conference. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. October 25th is the date. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.